Hi, this is Heather, and I'm doing my second speech number 2, my research speech for Communications 231 on autism spectrum disorders, or otherwise known as ASD. For my audience, I have Margaret and Daryl here today listening about my topic. Have you ever seen a child in a store or a park, or even perhaps a niece or nephew throwing a temper tantrum? Many times people tend to label this as the bad child, or they think that the child just needs to be disciplined. This is not always the case. Many times the child may have ASD, which is autism spectrum disorder, which you may not know. Autism spectrum disorders have become much more prevalent in the past 15 years. Today, almost every one of us knows a child that has ASD, or as it is sometimes referred to, this child is on the spectrum. Researchers do not know why there has been such an increase in children that are on the spectrum or with ASD, but during my speech, I will inform you of some of the signs, symptoms, and what you can do if you think you may have a child or know a child with ASD. Autism spectrum disorder is when a person has certain characteristics that are within a group of complex brain disorders. This is a neurological disorder. This disorder can cause developmental delays in young children, social and behavioral issues in toddlers and middle-aged children, learning disabilities from young-age children through high school, and later in life can cause Asperger's syndrome. This disorder can also lead to depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. Let's move on to the behaviors and characteristics that a child with ASD might exhibit. Here are some of the characteristics of a child with autism spectrum disorders. Very little to no eye contact during conversations and when speaking. They could be late in speaking or developing as a small child. If your child is perhaps 1.5 or 2 and they're not saying hi, bye, mom, or dad, this is obviously a sign. If they're delayed in sitting up, walking, or developing fine motor skills, writing their name as they get to be kindergarten age, this can also be a sign. Another big one that people don't often think about is lack of personal space. You know, when you're in a conversation or you're speaking to someone, this is your space, this is their space, and oftentimes ASD children have no concept of that space. They may stand too close, they may invade your space, and you kind of want to be like, oh, step back. Very often they have difficult time understanding figures of speech or sarcasm. A prime example of this is if a mother is correcting her child and he happens to be drinking a glass of water and they're talking about maybe chores that he didn't do for the day. She might say, that's enough, drop it. The ASD child may look at her and say, if I drop the glass, it'll break. Whereas she's referring to the conversation and the topic they're speaking of, whereas an ASD child can be very literal and not understand that she meant drop this subject topic. Oftentimes these children prefer to be alone and have difficulty making friends. A good way to explain this would be they will play with other children, but alongside the children. So there may be a group of 6 or 8 of their peers, and while they're playing next to them, they're not essentially associating with them. So they kind of like to be more on their own and have their own space. They're also oftentimes unaware or not interested in what is going on around them. Sometimes people would describe it as, for example, little Johnny is in his own little world, like he's completely unaware of the world around him because he's in his own little world. While research is still happening at this very minute, they currently do not have a cure or a cause for ASD. Some of the studies suggest that it is due to abnormalities in brain function during the developmental process or genetics. Environmental factors are being tested to see if they are linked, such as air pollution, viruses, preservatives in foods, colds that the mother could have contracted during pregnancy, or even complications she may have had during pregnancy. Here is what you can do if you have a child who has been diagnosed with ASD or you think may have ASD. Again, remember there is no cure, but recognizing this disease and early intervention is key. You need to be sure you are giving your child the skills, the tools, and the training that they need to develop successfully. The first step would be to speak to your pediatrician and to talk to them and tell them what your concerns are, what your observations have been. The next step could be to do your research. Talk to other parents, do research online, look up some of the things on the Autism Spectrum Disorder website. Do not think that your child is just slower to develop, or it'll come in time, or he or she will catch up, because oftentimes those are critical times where you can be intervening. Counseling, therapy, and social groups are big for these children. Repetitive behaviors and socialization is a big thing for them to help them develop the skills that they need. ASD is on the rise and does not show any signs of letting up. While it is a developmental and neurological disorder, plenty of people who are now adults are living with ASD every day. It's about learning your signs, symptoms, and getting the right treatment for you. In closing, I will leave you with a few statistics on ASD. 1 in 68 children have autism spectrum disorder. 1 in 42 are boys. 1 in 189 are girls. And more than 3.5 million Americans have ASD. ASD has increased by 2 to 15% steadily each year since 2002. Thank you.